Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. Thanks so much for joining us. I am joined by Henry and Patrick, co-founders of Reclaim, and we're here to demo a very exciting update with Smart Meetings, the newest feature, and all of the improvements to habits, as well as some exciting things that are on the roadmap for the rest of the year. I'm going to hand it over to them. We do have a Q&A box if you want to ask your questions there. I'll be monitoring that as we go to answer questions live, and we'll have a dedicated few minutes at the end to ask any other questions as well. But for now, I'm going to hand it over to Henry and Patrick to showcase everything that we've been working on this year.
Yeah, thanks, Elizabeth, and thanks to everyone for joining. I'm Henry. I'm one of the co-founders of Reclaim, as Elizabeth mentioned, and joined by my co-founder, either down or up there, depending on where you're looking in the grid. That's Patrick. I'll probably kick things off, and then Patrick, I'm sure we'll jump in at various moments to remind me of all the great things that we've done here. We've added a ton of new stuff to Reclaim over the last couple months, and if you've been exploring smart meetings or exploring habits, you may even have missed a couple of them. So that's really the purpose of this webinar, is to get everyone kind of up to speed on all the great things you can do with it now. Just for a little bit of background, we've been, obviously habits has been around in Reclaim for a very long time. It was one of the first features we ever built. In fact, originally, a little Reclaim trivia for you. It was called Lunch Buddy, and all it did was schedule lunch. So we've come a really long way since then, and now you can use it for all of your recurring routines. And so part of our goal here was to kind of rethink the habits platform in a way that would give you even more power and control for not only the routines you're already using it for, but for even a whole bunch of other routines that, previously you couldn't schedule with habits. And then smart one-on-ones, which some of the folks here might be familiar with, are a little more recent. We've had those for a couple years. And we really intentionally wanted to start with one-on-one scheduling because we wanted to kind of learn and iterate on that problem before we got into group meeting scheduling, which, as you can imagine, is a little harder. But we've made some really amazing progress on that front. And so you're going to see a lot of stuff that's kind of shared in between smart meetings and habits today, because they're kind of built on similar platforms, but obviously there'll be some differences as we get into one or the other. So I'll kick off by just sharing my screen here. And let's start with smart meetings, and maybe we'll kind of dive into habits in the kind of second half of this. So as I mentioned, smart one-on-ones is kind of the precursor to this feature. And now with smart meetings, as you can see here in this handy detected tab where you have existing recurring meetings, we now allow you to both create as well as convert your existing multi-person meetings. So meetings with 6, 10, 20 people, you can set up as smart meetings, meaning they'll schedule around everyone's mutual availability. And just to give you a sense of all the stuff that's changed here, I'll kind of focus on like the form itself so you can kind of see all the different options that we've introduced. And then I'll show you how this kind of manifests on the calendar. So I'll take this one-on-one that I have here with Kathy that's now a smart meeting. So a lot of it should feel somewhat similar. One of the things you'll notice here is this little alert at the top that says editing Tuesday, May 14th, and all instances after. And this is a pretty core piece that's going to come up a few times as we go through the demo. A big part of this shift with habits and smart meetings is we have moved to using true recurring events in Google Calendar. And that means that the way those events are going to behave when you edit them in Google or you edit them in Reclaim is going to be really familiar if you're already using recurring events inside the calendar. And it just gives you a much more natural kind of integration with your existing calendar events. And I'll show you all the different ways that you can kind of take advantage of this new capability as we kind of go into things like agendas and, adding guests for certain meetings, that kind of thing. But again, pretty familiar controls here, except now you can add multiple people. So I can go in and add, Creed and Jim. You can see here we've got this little alert if we don't have calendar access, and you kind of give you some pointers on what you can do to amend that if you need to. One thing I'll just point out here, and this is a fairly recent change, it's very common sometimes for people meeting in really far away time zones. Like let's say you're in Portland, like we are on the west coast of the United States, and you're meeting with someone who's in Israel. It's really, really far away time zone wise. It's sometimes very common for people to have like a set of hours that they've all kind of agreed on that are a little weird. They're maybe not like the most common hours that you'd have meetings. And we've added some controls to help with that. And so, for example, if I say like, hey, I want to meet from like, sometime between 6 p.m. and 9 p.m. here, like, which is not, those aren't like super typical meeting hours. And let's say Kathy, we're in a really radically different time zone. I can switch this guy here and basically say, hey, just use the hours in my time zone. So this is a really nice way, nice little control that we've added to make it so that when you're setting these things up, you can kind of peg things to your own time zone instead of just looking for the intersection across everyone's time zones. Of course, if you don't do this and you say use everyone's hours, it'll just kind of look for that overlap between you and that other person. So pretty familiar controls here. Not too much has changed, except obviously you can add many more people, and you have this nice little control to manage kind of cross time zone compatibility. This visualization is pretty new, and you'll see this in habits as well. This is a great way to kind of understand, based on the hours you've selected, kind of what times are eligible. And this is just like a nice way of kind of getting a sense of, what's the real like available zone that we're going to have to schedule within. And then actually another thing I had neglected to mention when I got here, but this is a good reminder of it, you can now set optional attendees on Smart Meetings, which is really nice because now you can kind of set up your meetings where you have, maybe a whole bunch of busy people in different time zones. And you can say, actually, AJ doesn't need to be there, and Tony doesn't need to be there, and Chris doesn't need to be there. Kathy definitely needs to be there. And you can kind of see how that changes the eligibility. They'll still be added to the meeting, but Reclaim won't consider their availability. So this is great if you're running like a team stand-up or something like that, and you've got a product manager who's got a crazy calendar, and you just want to make sure it looks at the engineers' calendars. This is a nice way to do that. And then the really big changes, and this goes to that point we made earlier about recurring events, we have added support for basically any recurring frequency that you can set up in Google Calendar. So here you're seeing kind of the classic, like do this thing, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times a week on these, ideally on this day, sometime between these days, all those kind of classic controls. But now you also have the ability to do stuff like, hey, I want to meet with someone on around the fourth Tuesday of every month, or around the, 17th of every month. And just like in Google, you have those controls, but what Reclaim's going to do is try to find the time that's sort of closest to that range. So we kind of give you a lot more control. And the same is true for habits as we go into that feature. And then same is true of this custom option. You can do things like, I want to do this every kind of month, sometime around the 17th or fourth Tuesday of the month. So tons of new recurrence controls. Smart meetings or smart one-on-ones used to not have minimum and maximum durations the way that habits do. And this is another really powerful control. If you've got meetings that you're okay kind of shrinking down to 15 minutes, but having for as long as 45 minutes, you now have that level of control. And then you can add start and end times. So you can say like, hey, I want to start this thing on the 14th. And if you have a meeting that is only going to go for a few months, you can end it, 3 months out from now. So the rest of this should be fairly familiar as far as the time policies and then the priority here. Another new thing that we've added, and this is true of habits as well, is this concept of what we should do if we can't schedule something. And this is something that came up a lot with smart one-on-ones, where people would say, look, sometimes there's not enough time on the calendar, but I don't want the meeting to disappear. I don't want to like lose track of it. And so we now have the ability to leave meetings on the calendar. You have the ability to leave meetings on the calendar, and we'll alert you when something can't be scheduled around your mutual availability, but the event will still be there. And so this is great, not only for smart meetings, but even in some cases we've heard for habits where people just say, look, I still want to see that it's there and I want to hit the goal, and I'll move it to a better time myself. So this is a powerful control and kind of helps with like taking the risk out of these sorts of things.
And Henry, I would just add on that one, when it leaves it on the calendar, where it leaves it is important too. And so understand that it will try to put it on the ideal day and time. So if you say it's weekly Friday at 9:30, or it's the fourth Thursday of the month at 9:30, whatever you select, that becomes the recurring event that's naturally on the calendar, and it'll put it back over there, with one exception. If that ideal day is now in the past, like say it's one day past the fourth Thursday of the month, it'll just leave it as at the place it was last scheduled, basically the last known good spot. But if that ideal time is still in the future, it'll land back over there.
Yep.
It's just important to pick those times because they help kind of bring together the dynamic world of the scheduling with the kind of natural, familiar world of recurring events.
Yeah, and just on that note, if you go in and you convert a detected smart meeting, we automatically pull in the ideal time based on where it's currently scheduled, like its current recurrence frequency. And so one of the nice things about this is if you convert a meeting, and let's say it's, I don't know, you convert a 50-person meeting or something like that, and there's no other free times besides the time that's there. Reclaim may not do anything with it, but it's also not going to remove it, right? You're not going to lose that meeting just because you've converted it, because we'll just leave it at the time it was already scheduled. So it's a nice way to also just kind of mitigate the kind of risk of converting meetings, and you can kind of just, you know, go nuts with it and know that it's not going to screw up people's calendars. I'll talk a little bit more once we get into some of the, I'll show you how we manage agendas in the recurrence, but you can see here, we've got this little put your agenda here description area, and I'll show you what we're doing for event descriptions here in a moment, which also ties into like how we help you sort of manage different changes and track them and kind of audit things that change in the schedule. All the video conference stuff is pretty familiar, although this is pretty new, and I should have added conference rooms prior to this, but you can now automatically pull in any physical conference rooms that are in your Google Workspace. It's just a small permission that we get from Google, and then you can add conference rooms, one or more conference rooms automatically to a smart meeting. And this is great for like hybrid teams where some days you may be in office, some days you may be on Zoom. It's pretty typical to add both to a meeting, and we can add multiple locations, both physical and virtual.
And I want to add a couple of notes here, Henry, because it also somewhat addressed a question we got from one user here, or at least acknowledge that there's some questions out there. A couple things. The video conferencing, if any of you have been using Smart 101s, you may know that with Zoom, we were rewriting the URL to be something that didn't have Zoom in it. And there were there were reasons for that, but it could be confusing to you and your attendee. That is no longer the case anymore. So if you add Zoom integration here, you'll see a nice clean Zoom URL. But we will also tell you that you can come right into this. Henry's going to talk more about the two-way synchronization in a second. We would actually recommend you add Zoom this way after the fact. It's a little awkward, but if you have the Zoom, if you're using Zoom and you're interested in smart meetings, the very best experience for everybody is to use this Google Workspace Zoom integration you're seeing here on the right-hand side. And by adding it to the recurring series for all events, it's basically the preferred way for Zoom to be attached to a recurring series. And we'll detect that and work with it. We actually also work with any other video conferencing solution. So it's not just Google Meet or Zoom. You can put Microsoft Teams, you can put WebEx, you can put GoToMeeting, anything else you want. So it's not just limited to those two. And then last thing I'll say is about the conference room stuff is, for the moment, when you pick a conference room, it's always on the series invite. You can remove it for individual events yourself, or even add other conference rooms if you want. Our roadmap plans in the future include automatically selecting conference rooms or dropping them if you don't need it. If both people are working from home, then we would release the conference room so that those that are in the office could use it. And similarly, if we see both people are in the same office, we'd make sure we secure a conference room. So this is just the beginning of a lot more that we have planned. And that we will also incorporate travel time and things like that, because the conference room will help give that information. We don't do that today, but that is coming. All right, back to you, Henry. Thanks.
Yeah, no, and it's a good reminder on video conferencing for folks who use Smart 101s before. In addition to those Zoom links looking a little weird, you also probably noticed that when you would pull up, I don't know how many folks here do this, but I know at least some use their Zoom client as a way to see like their upcoming meetings. And because of how we were doing smart one-on-ones and how those Zoom links were formed, because they weren't true recurring events, you wouldn't see them in that list of upcoming meetings. And so now, really the highlight benefit here is by moving to recurring meetings, we are compatible with the hundreds or probably thousands of other platforms out there that rely on recurring meetings to understand like a regular thing that is happening. And so any calendar client, any sort of Zoom related thing, any, those little things you see on conference rooms, Zoom rooms, whatever they're called, those will all work now naturally, including also stuff like Lattice and Fellow, if you're managing like agendas or status reports that way. So a lot of really nice changes came out of that.
And I know there.
Time. Oh.
Yeah,
Ahead,
Elizabeth, I was going to say there's a few questions that have piled up, and there's a few I'm strategically holding for a minute. Philippe asked some questions around simulation and out of office events. I will address those, and there's some questions also about travel time. But there were two questions that are relevant right now. Slack huddles. We are not aware of an integration with Slack huddles and calendar events. And so I wouldn't say we have great integration there. My advice for you, if you wanted to use that, is, we'll also drop a support message with us if you have some ideas on it. But you can also just write into the location, say like, hit me up on Slack huddles or something. We'd be open to even tighter integrations on that as well. And then there was one more question that's kind of relevant to the section up above, Henry, that the attendees section. Keith asked, how does this work with people outside of your organization? Absolutely, this can work well. There are a couple things to highlight here that I want to say is, if we can see access, then we can do the scheduling around their busy events as well. If we can't see access, you'll get this kind of pop up here. So Keith, if you want to use it, you may want to encourage them to at least open up availability. They don't need to be in your team, and they don't need to be a Reclaim user. But if Reclaim can't see their availability through your Google Calendar account, it won't be able to schedule around their busy events or understand what time zone they're in. And so the minimum thing you could do to make sure it's a great experience is ask them to share their free busy availability to you, using the normal Google Calendar share settings, and there's nice instructions there in that pop-up Henry had opened up. But it is not, just to be really clear, Smart Meetings do not require anybody to be in your Reclaim team, to be a paid Reclaim user, or even have a Reclaim account. But the minimum necessary information to do the job is that we need to be able to see their availability so that we know their time zone and their free time on their calendar.
Yep.
So yeah, we do have lots of customers who are using it in that exact way, and I hope you're able to use it as well.
Yep. Yeah, it's something else to note on that front. If they do share their calendar with you, but they don't want to sign up for Reclaim, you can still set hours on their behalf. So like one of the really big reasons, the two big reasons I'd say to sign up for Reclaim as a Smart Meeting attendee is to set your own hours and to set your own priorities, right? Because that's a big part of how we kind of take advantage of a little more data and a little more information that helps us to find the right times. But if they're really adamant they don't want to sign up for Reclaim and they just want to share their calendar with you, you can still set hours on their behalf if you kind of know what works for them. So you still got control kind of as the organizer here to do that. Last thing before I dive into just like how does all this stuff show up on the calendar and how do you kind of manage it and all that? We also now introduced this feature we call dependencies, and dependencies, just to be super, super clear, are not like do this thing exactly before this thing. It's not like buffer time where it's attached to the event. It's more like a thing you want to make sure happens sometime before or after, or on a different day than something else. So the classic example for like a meeting would be, I want to make sure I write my status report before I have my one-on-one with my manager, or I want to make sure that after our morning marketing meeting, I have time to review the GTM metrics. The on a different day then is really useful as we get into habits. You'll see things like, you can have like arm day and leg day on 2 different days if you're exercising. And so these are just kind of great ways to get more control over how these things get sequenced on your calendar. So I'll cancel out of here for a second. And then before I dive into the actual calendar itself, I want to actually go to the details page because this has gone through a whole bunch of changes as well. And as I mentioned earlier, like you can see here, this kind of this status information that wasn't here previously for Smart 101s or for habits. And this is us kind of recognizing that what you're really viewing here is kind of like an instance of the series, and the controls that we give you are sort of relative to that instance. You can see when I click this, it's like, hey, now you're viewing this instance. And you can see these little change messages here. Like this is where you've made changes to different sorts of parts of the event. And we're recording those changes in real time and making sure that, you sort of know like, okay, you added more attendees here, you changed the agenda on this date, and it sort of, just keeps track of all of that stuff for you. Another really cool thing about this is this new feature called changelog. And with changelog, we're actually going to show you when smart meetings get moved and also what conflicts might have caused them to move, right? So you can see here, I had a team sync that caused my one-on-one with Kathy to get moved to 8:45, and it tells me when it happened and sort of why it happened. So this is just another one of those like great ways of building trust around this feature with people, where you can kind of get a good sense of, why is this thing moving, especially when you've got an auto scheduler in the background that's kind of managing that for you. And just kind of sticking with this for a moment, one really powerful part of having this instance level control is I can go in and actually edit. Like let's say on June 11th, I want to start adding in like a new person to this meeting. I'm like, hey, I'm going to start with Nazem, I think is who I'm going to add. So Nazem's going to join us starting on June 11th, right? And for all the instances after, because they're going to be a new kind of guest attendee on this meeting. So I can save this, dismiss this guy. This is a nice, I'll come back to notifications here in a moment, but you can see now you get a little warning that says, would you like to send notifications to people? And I'll show you how you can get more control over smart meeting notifications here in a second. But I'm going to go ahead and send those updates. And then what you see here is we've recorded that Nazem was added starting on June 11th, right? So now you've got this like nice little change log that shows you kind of when these different facets of your smart meeting are changing, which really helps to kind of keep the calendar, the state of your kind of recurring events in Google and Reclaim in sync. The other thing I'll note on this is you can do this in either direction. So if I went out, I think, what was that, June 11th that I said I was going to add Nazem? If I said, I'm going to, in addition to adding Nazem on June 11th, I'm going to change the title of this, and it's no longer Kevin and Kathy for reals. It's Kevin plus Nazem plus Kathy, right? So this is my new title, and I'm going to say this and following events are going to get this new title. I send it off, and in a second here, there we go. So we added Nazem and we changed the title going forward. So you can do this really from from anywhere, right? You can do it from Reclaim or in Google Calendar, and it all just syncs back and forth, which is really powerful. I mentioned notifications briefly. I just want to make sure we don't miss that. You now have control. Oh, go ahead, Patrick.
No, please. This is related to one of the questions from Philippe, so I'll just I'm ready to add on once you cover it.
Yeah. Do you want to actually take this section since you're right. Mr. Notifications?
Yeah, Philippe asked if we have considered any sort of like simulator. It sounds, totally understand the root of the question here. Basically, as you're getting into smart meetings, it can feel a little risky because you're introducing this robot that's scheduling things, and you might not know what to expect or how the attendees are going to receive notifications or respond to the changes that are happening. So we've added, Philippe, these features might have actually arrived after you first tried things out, more controls around notifications. For one, you just saw it a moment ago. When you create or update any smart meeting, we will ask you whether you want to push those notifications out, similar to what you've probably experienced with Google Calendar. But in addition, you as the organizer can come into this section, settings, notifications, and control under smart meeting attendee notifications, how and when Reclaim should also send notifications for any events that change on the calendar. By default, we select 3 days. 3 days means today, tomorrow, and the next day. It's also worth noting that by default, we lock down smart meetings, just like we did with smart one-on-ones, for things that are on the same day. So at the very early mornings of your hours, Reclaim wakes up and it locks every smart meeting on your calendar by default. You can change that to be either off or to lock when the week starts. So not just the same day, but the same week. Both of those controls are designed to help keep your schedule stable in the near term and also give people some heads up if things have to change. The scheduler is designed to be pretty stable, and so you shouldn't see lots of aggressive changes in the next few days. But if you're first setting things up, there might be some of that. And so one thing you could do, we don't have a simulator, although we have to discuss that. So you're on the right track there. But what you could do is come in here and just toggle this thing off as you're kind of getting things set up the way you want it. And once you've adjusted the priorities and you really like how the schedule is, it will be putting it on the calendar, but it won't be sending notifications to your colleagues. And then you can come back in here and activate this and set it for 1, 2, or 3 days might be appropriate for you. Last thing I will mention, and something we are working on improving, is this is predominantly designed for other people that are on Google Calendar. And so I will urge a little caution if your attendee is on Office 365, Microsoft 365, Outlook, whatever you want to call it. As you all probably know, we've been hard at work on that, and we're about to launch support for that, and that will address some of this that I'm about to say. But right now, we cannot control this notification for people who are external to the Google Calendar ecosystem. And so if you are looking at using it for clients or other people outside your organization, double check that they're on Google. If they're on Google, this setting will apply. If they're not, they'll get notifications no matter what. And it could get a little noisy. And so I would encourage you to make sure people are on Google as you use this. All right, I hope that answered that question, Philippe. I know there's one more and we'll get to that in a moment.
Cool. Another thing just on this note, and this kind of goes to one other thing, we don't have this demoable in our demo account, but you'll kind of see it maybe in your own account. Hopefully not, but if you do, you've got some nice notifications about it now. We are now starting to capture when a smart meeting is at risk or could not be scheduled. And if you do have meetings at risk, you'll see another tab here that says like at risk or needs attention, I think it says, and you click needs attention and we'll show you like, here's the things we couldn't schedule. And it gives you some little suggestions on ways you could amend it. And again, this is just, you can kind of see the theme here is all about building even more trust and even less risk and even less sort of, more reliability around knowing when things change. Then arguably we've hopefully given you even more visibility into why meetings change than even Google Calendar has. So we're pretty excited about kind of all the visibility we've opened up there. Well, I'm here. I almost forgot this part. Another thing is we have all these new sorting options, and you'll see this in habits as well. One of our most requested sort of sorting options for this was like, show me when my next scheduled meeting is. But also we added stuff like title sorting and priority sorting and attendee sorting. So you've got a lot of control now. And then you also can see your different meetings by category. You can see your different priorities. So you've got lots more controls over sorting and filtering. And similarly, speaking of sorting and filtering, and we'll come back to this in a little bit, if you are on Smart Series, you also have access to our new search bar. You probably remember our search bar from Reclaim. It was not something that we built. It was a third party that we had integrated with, and we decided like the best way for us to kind of continue on this mission, especially as we get into some cool AI capabilities, would be to kind of own this ourselves. And now you can actually search across everything in Reclaim. So I can say, find me this guy, and then I can also take actions from there. I can, do things like edit it. If I want to go find, a task for, board slides or whatever, I can take little actions from here, send it to up next, that sort of thing. And you can access that by hitting Command K. We'll come back to that as we get towards the end of this discussion. And I think that's pretty much everything on smart meetings. Before I dive into the calendar, the very, very last thing I wanted to show you, and you have access to this if you're part of the smart meetings group, or if you've already opted in, you now have controls over emojis. This is one of those things that's come up quite a bit. Right now, it's just for smart meetings and habits. If you want to celebrate it coming soon for tasks and calendar sync, I'm going to celebrate one more time just for good measure. You can pop some confetti there. This gives you the ability to kind of remove or change these emojis that are kind of added by default. And you can see there's a few new ones here, really just one new one, which is that I mentioned earlier, that leave it on the calendar behavior. You'll see this if something can't be scheduled. It's kind of like a little alert that just tells you, when something could or couldn't be scheduled. I love emojis. I'm keeping all of them on, but if you wanna turn them off, you can go for it. And part of the reason we allowed for this type of kind of disabling of emojis is we've kind of moved to this model that that uses RSVP, as the way to indicate whether something's flexible or not. A lot of you, if you've used Reclaim for a long time, you're familiar with the concept of like we make events free, we make them busy based on how kind of jam-packed your schedule is. It's kind of part of our secret sauce. And that was really the whole reason we had those emojis, was to help you understand when something was free or when it was marked busy. What we've kind of moved to, though, is a model where if something's marked as free, it's actually RSVP'd as maybe. This is actually a habit. I'll go to a one-on-one here. Find one that's maybe. I can't find one here. I'll just stick with the habit. So if it's marked as free, it's RSVP2 as maybe. If it is something that is locked in and busy, it's RSVP2 as yes. And then of course, just like smart meetings have always worked, if you were to RSVP no, that is a sign to reschedule the meeting. You can do that by clicking here, or you can just say no. So that's kind of one thing you're going to notice, is that your habits and your smart meetings now have like an RSVP status on them. And we're going to use that as kind of a way to signify whether the time is flexible or tentative, or whether it's marked as busy. And these statuses will change automatically as your calendar fills up. Besides that, not too much has changed here. I mean, in the sense of you can still RSVP no to reschedule. If time gets blocked out for either of you, it's going to automatically reschedule. You can move events manually still in the lock. So if I want to take like Lonnie's meeting and move it to, 6 p.m., I can do that, and it's going to lock in here. So a lot of the stuff that you'll see is really familiar. I think where you'll really start to see a lot of benefits, and I won't walk through every single incarnation of this, is really around editing events. I think if you use smart meetings or smart one-on-ones or habits, you probably had scenarios where you were like, hey, for this one habit or this one day, I want to just like add some notes, or I want to change the title, or I want to add a video conference link, or I want to add like a guest attendee. And that's really the control now that you have directly from here. So if you want to go in and tweak the agenda, or you want to add or remove people for just that event or that and following or all the events, we give you all of those controls from within Google or within Reclaim. And so that's just a really neat way of getting to kind of, make those changes that you want to make for specific instances.
And also add here, a very popular feature request was travel time for habits and smart meetings. So this is a great time to note that with a habit, you could, like for example, say you have a workout habit and it's at the local gym. You could add it to the series and say, and in Google Calendar, put the address in and say for all events. Or it might be a lunch that you want to add just one attendee, and you have a specific spot you're going to meet a friend with, and you put the lunch in there for just a single instance. In either case, Reclaim will now automatically add travel time before and after smart meeting and habit events, whether it's a one-off instance or for the whole series. So that addressed that feedback. That was a very popular request from all of you.
Cool. Yeah, this is probably a good time as any to reach into habits. And a lot of what we talked about with smart meetings is going to be pretty familiar here. You'll kind of see a lot of the same features. There's some little differences that we'll showcase here. One big thing just off the bat, and if you've been using habits for a long time, maybe this isn't that big of a deal, but if you're pretty new to habits and you've still got a lot of those like old kind of recurring routines that you want to convert to be smart habits, there is now this detected tab, just like there is in smart meetings, where we will automatically detect any solo work, recurring events that are on your calendar and suggest them as habits that you can create. So obviously you've always had these templates where we can kind of suggest some nice habits to you based on your role. But now you have detected habits where we can kind of, automatically convert something that you've created. The other thing I'll note, actually, since we're talking about detected, and Patrick put this in kind of recently, and this is a really nice little feature. It used to be that if you, I forget if it was deleted or disabled. Was it, Patrick, did you do this for both deleted and disabled? I think for both.
Oh,
it used to be
yes.
Go ahead.
I can elaborate. So for any of you who are looking at using the detected tab for habits or smart meetings, what we do is we take the original recurring series that's on your calendar and we end it and replace it with a new habit or smart meeting to replace to continue forward and carry forward. It'll have the same recurrence, the same details, all that kind of stuff. If for any reason in the next 30 days you decide it's not for you, it's low risk. If you delete that converted habit or smart meeting from Reclaim's UI, we will reactivate the original recurrent series going forward. So we want to make it really easy for you to try things out. If you don't like it, just delete it. Obviously, you can delete your account too, and it'll do the same thing. After 30 days, because there will already have been some history of things, if you delete it or then it won't do that. But you could still go back to the original series if you want and just edit it right in Google Calendar to bring it going forward. So hopefully it gives you a sense of confidence as you try this out.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, for habits, really kind of the same sorts of things. You're going to get a lot of these same sorts of change log messages. And here you can actually see some nice little like Wednesdays, it's not scheduled. This is actually a funny, Patrick, we've got a bug filed for this one. The reason it's not scheduled is because I've got an avoid duplicate event, but it's also particularly useful if you don't have a habit or smart meeting scheduled on a certain day. It'll alert you to that and kind of say like, hey, you're moving away from your goal here. Just like smart meetings, you get a change log here that kind of tells you why certain things, could or couldn't be scheduled, could or could not be scheduled. And then just like in smart meetings, you have that same sort of recurrence level control. So you can do things like, edit this and following and go in and, modify the agenda. And this, I'm not going to eat something good. I'm going to eat hot dogs. And I'm actually going to change this, to a hot dog emoji because, why not? And so now I'm going to just, I'm going to update my lunch just to make sure everyone knows I'm eating hot dogs starting on May 16th. That's hot dog week. So same kind of set of controls that you have in smart meetings. You've got all these new recurrence frequencies. So people who wanted to do like, I want to do a habit to, do my taxes. Well, taxes are probably a bad example. I want to catch up on my financials around the end of every month. Like these are great for not exactly recurring tasks, but we're kind of getting to that point where this is pretty darn close to having recurring task support inside of Reclaim. You've got these new start and end dates. Habits used to not have end dates on them. So now you can say like, hey, for the next 3 months, I'm recruiting and I want to spend 3 months on recruiting. And then by the end of that, period, I want it to kind of fall off my calendar. And then most of these other features are the same as they were in previous habits. But again, you've now got these dependency mapping features where you can do things like do this habit before this other habit or never do this habit on the same day as this other habit. So a lot of really, really nice controls here.
And I'll just chime in on a couple of things. We know a lot of you, if you're looking at the dependency stuff, you want multiple dependencies. You'd like to be able to express more complex dependencies. I promise you it's coming. And you might also be wondering where are task dependencies also coming. We broke a lot of new ground in the scheduler by bringing this capability forward. And so it'll also land for tasks. Henry didn't mention it, but just briefly at the very bottom, because someone else asked about it earlier too, Henry, target calendar support. You can't edit it right now. So we do know this is a little irritating. If you've already got a habit created, you'll have to recreate it. But if you go to the very bottom here, Henry, habits now in Habits 2.0 and smart meetings can be targeted to different connected calendars. So as you go into your settings and calendars, you can set up different connected calendars. So if you want to be able to have like a dedicated habit calendar that you show and hide, so you can kind of spread out the clutter, great way to do that is just schedule it off to a different calendar. You can now better cleanly divide your personal and work life. So you can put your workout habit on your personal calendar and your work related habits on your work calendar. So lots of great capabilities here. And then one more thing someone asked is, what's the benefit of like taking a detected recurring series and converting it if you just leave it on the calendar? It's a great question. And what I would say is somewhat is just wait till you see what else we've got planned, because there's a lot of new things that are coming around the corner. And the more you let Reclaim kind of take over, the more optimized the scheduler can be. But even if it never moves, you get stats that come from it, and you get the ability to more clearly declare that you've skipped it. And you can move it around and lock it in place. And so there's a lot of nice little benefits. It'll manifest through in your Slack status. So our vision of the future is that the intelligent scheduling we're doing is of course the cornerstone of Reclaim, but in the future, even when we're not moving things very much, you're going to see a lot of additional workflows coming for both meetings and habits. And so converting some of these things may be worth the effort. So yeah, thank you for those questions, folks. Back to you, Henry.
Cool. Yeah, no, I almost forgot about target calendar support. I told you there's a lot here, and I knew I was going to forget something. I think the last thing I'll just talk about briefly, and then we'll show you a sneak peek. And Patrick alluded to some of the ways in which we're hoping to make the scheduler even smarter about how it makes different decisions and trade-offs. And we'll show you what we've been doing on that front, and give you a very, very early sneak peek of something that's coming soon. But one other thing, just on the note of the scheduler getting smarter, we've now added, and you won't see any controls around this right now. We haven't made it user configurable. It's just some logic that kind of lives and an algorithm that kind of lives behind the scenes. But we've also added what we're calling priority boosts to smart meetings, and then I believe to habits as well. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, Patrick.
That is correct. Yeah. Let me just jump in and share what Henry's referring to. There are a number of nudges and boosts that optimize the scheduler in this new platform. So, for example, if you've got a biweekly one-on-one with somebody and it hasn't happened in, say, 2 or 3 weeks, we understand if you're a manager, that starts to send a pretty bad signal if you've gotten busy or they got busy, and it's important that you get that meeting scheduled. So we now natively boost the priority level up a full notch for each period that the habit or smart meeting is not getting scheduled. And so one thing to keep in mind is don't overdo it on marking your habits or smart meetings as critical, because you want to leave some room for things to boost up and overtake some of the other ones. We definitely recommend kind of in that middle priority level most of the time. On top of that, we have smaller priority nudges and optimizations in the schedule that relate to how much overlapping time there is. And so we will slightly prefer scheduling a one-on-one or meeting between people who are in very different time zones where there's minimal amount of overlap compared to, say, someone who's in your time zone. We will also prefer group meetings naturally because of that time zone overlap. They will get nudged up slightly higher. So yeah, there's a lot of nice little improvements, and we're going to keep iterating on those, of course. If you can't tell, our goal here is for you to keep using your calendar in the way you've been doing it, and natively in your calendar experience, but also to be able to express kind of away from the calendar what your goals and desires are around how you want to manage your time and what your priorities are. And so Reclaim's going to keep getting smarter the more you invest in telling us about the relationships and the projects and the priorities and the routines that matter to you. And that's what we're all about, and that's why you see the product experience like it is. And these priority boosts are a great example of how they manifest through in the product.
Yeah, and that's probably a good segue. I don't think there's anything else to cover on habits and smart meetings, and I want to make sure we leave a couple minutes for Q&A and any other questions. But I'm going to give a super, super fast demo of something we're really excited about. And you saw kind of a little preview of it here, this Reclaim Assistant. And this is something we have not opened up to anyone yet. We've got some kind of early prototypes that we're building out around it. And so this is a risky demo. It may be a little bit slow, and we're still in the process of kind of optimizing it and tuning it. But we've really been thinking about how can we start to integrate Reclaim. Reclaim's this very intelligent scheduling platform. It's very, very robust, has all of these sort of knobs and dials and controls and all this extra context about your schedule. And we believe that AI is going to transform scheduling and transform how we manage our time, but we don't think that LLMs alone are going to solve it. That those are like a layer for you to talk to and for it to interpret things, but you still need that really smart infrastructure under the hood.
And just if folks who don't know what an LLM is, that is think of something like a Chat GPT. It's a large language model.
Cool. And yeah, so we've been in the process now of trying to think about how this new world is going to interact with Reclaim. And so we've been thinking about really 3 big workflows right now. One is task creation, right? I want to be able to tell Reclaim really quickly that I need to get something done and tell it when it's urgent and give it some extra context about where I want it scheduled. The second is basically like taking a break or even like clocking out for the day. Like, hey, something came up. I now need to step away for a few hours. I need to step away for the rest of the day. And then the last and probably the most exciting is meeting scheduling. I want to get time with this person sometime in the next couple of weeks, and you can give Reclaim sort of some extra context around that. And so I'm going to go ahead and kick things off here. So this is Reclaim Assistant. The first thing I'm going to show you is that task creation flow. So let's say I need 1 hour to work on a slide deck for the board meeting. It's urgent, needs to happen by EOD, right? So I've told Reclaim now I need an hour. I've said it's pretty urgent. I need to have this thing happen by the end of the day. And Reclaim's going to go through, and you can see it's already starting to create that task. And you'll see behind the scenes here, we're on Tuesday, so you'll see this planner kind of start to get updated. And Reclaim has sort of context about how urgent this thing is to me relative to my other priorities. And because everything in Reclaim is prioritized, it's actually getting a sense of, where this thing should live relative to the other stuff that's on my calendar. You can see it already just bumped this out and moved that other task over, that original task that had come from Jira. And it's sitting in my up next list, and it's a P1 task, right? So that's pretty cool. So task creation is kind of one of those workflows that we're thinking about. But now I'm going to say, actually, need to step away for the rest of the day for an urgent family matter. Right. So here, what we're really showing is that workflow. And I think this comes up a lot when we talk to different Reclaim users of like, hey, something came up. I need to step away. I need my calendar to get blocked out. I need Reclaim to sort of reschedule all the stuff that I've got there. And this should be a pretty healthy break, because I basically said I need to step away for the rest of the day. And there we go. You can see urgent family matter break. GPT did an interesting job of naming that one. And you can see it's also alerting me now that slide deck task that I created is now at risk of missing its due date, right? Because I said I need to get this done by the end of the day, and it's sort of alerting you like, hey, I took the break, but just so you know, it's now scheduled on Wednesday for you, or at 5 p.m. So that's kind of the other kind of interesting workflow related to just sort of like those in the moment decisions that you're making. And then the last one here is meeting scheduling. And this is where we're kind of bringing together the concepts of priorities on your calendar, as well as starting to gather more context about what's on your schedule and who's in your contact list. So we have a teammate named Daniel, who unfortunately has to receive all of my meeting invites every time I do this demo. But I'm going to go ahead and say, I need to get 1 hour to meet with Daniel to discuss the status of Project Mastodon. It's urgent. Need to, it should happen by this Friday. It's okay to book over anything except my customer calls. So you can see here, I'm kind of giving Reclaim a few different concepts here. I'm saying Daniel, and so it's searching through my contacts and my coworkers to figure out who Daniel is. I've given it some context about what the meeting's about. I've said it's urgent, right? So it knows it's kind of a P1. Yes, it is Daniel Cato. Yes, that's the right Daniel. Actually, never seen this. I've never seen this message before. This is a new one to me.
If it doesn't feel confident that that it knows which Daniel, you must have met with another Daniel recently. So
could be different Daniel, evil Daniel. So you can see here, I've got some meeting slots that it's presented me with, and it's telling me, hey, this is going to overbook certain lower priority events, right? You got your engineering coffee chat, you've got your weekly debrief with engineering, you've got actual free time here. And I'm like, actually, I kind of like meeting at noon on Thursday. Let's try to make that happen. So now it's going to overbook that meeting. But you can see it didn't suggest anything that would overbook a customer call, because it was smart enough to know, like, hey, there's meetings with external domains, there's meetings with customers that you don't want to be booking over. But it was also smart enough to know, hey, there's lower priority stuff that could probably make room for this urgent meeting that you have with Daniel. And that meeting just got scheduled, and you can see here it is. So that's kind of where we're going, and it's again a very, very early sneak peek of kind of the future of Reclaim Assistant, but hopefully gives you a sense of what's coming in the next couple months here.
Yeah. And I can sweep through some of the questions and kind of weave them into kind of bringing this close. Someone asked, how can we add a non-smart meeting just like at a specific time with a specific person? You certainly just saw more of an AI assisted scheduling workflow, which can even find times when technically one or multiple of you aren't free. But if you know when you want to do a meeting, Reclaim is totally built around the model of just using your calendar the way you always have. And so if there's a meeting you want to do at a specific date and time, just put it on there, book it using the normal workflows that you use today, and Reclaim adapts around it. It always treats those as fixed items. And so hopefully that answers that question, and you can see what we're doing as well around kind of one-off workflows, intelligent scheduling workflows. Someone else, just for the whole audience to know, asked, rather than a chat interface, are there other interfaces that can help coordinate meetings? And the answer is we are absolutely working on that. One, you can expect that this experience Henry just shared with you isn't just going to be done through a keyboard on a desktop, but it's going to be done through voice on a mobile application, on a mobile app. That's probably going to be the most common flow for what you saw. But also, we expect that in the near future, you'll be able to loop in Reclaim as a CC on an email and coordinate meetings that way. And we absolutely know that there are some times where the workflow, the scheduling workflow that we need to do needs to wait on other people to give us feedback before we book things. And so you can count on that being something that's coming in the near future. I hope that answers a couple of questions. And let me just keep going through the rest of the list here. Elizabeth, I don't know if there's any you want to jump us over to. I know I can go back to the top. We had a few right at the very beginning. One person asked about travel time. There's a lot baked into travel time. I'll just say we know we can do more around kind of detecting the flow of your schedule and figuring out where your working location is and making inferences around, you went to this place and you stayed in that place for your next meeting, and so you don't need travel time between those meetings. So yeah, Jared, I think just stay tuned. We have a lot of ideas planned there to improve that experience. Philippe asked about out of office events with smart meetings, and how they impact the scheduling for multi-person meetings. This is our first version of smart meetings. We know there's a lot more work we can do, and one of the near-term improvements that's coming is moving from a model where we look for free time for 100% of the required attendees to something where we look for the maximum required attendees that we can find, even if it's less than 100%. The feedback we've been hearing from our customers is that they like the optional capability that Henry shared, but it would be really nice if we could do things like find the best time where, say, between 50 and 100% of the required attendees. So if it's a 4-person meeting, if at least 3 people can make it, then that's good enough. And that's probably something that will be toggleable as well. So yeah, there's more that we can do there. We likely will also make a special exception for out of office events where we just won't make that person a required attendee on those days. Okay, I know those were 2 questions that landed very early in the meeting, and I wanted to make sure we address those. Let's see. One person asked about Fellow integration. I can't say I know all of the Fellow workflows, but what I can tell you is Fellow was right in our kind of radar, and we've met with the team there to make sure our smart meeting product was much more compatible with it. And so there's probably more we can do with Fellow, but right off the bat, smart one-on-ones, we're not compatible with Fellow at all, and smart meetings are. In large part because we adopted native recurring meetings. We're happy to explore additional workflows, and I would encourage you to, if you're a Fellow user, to reach out to us and tell us what you'd like to see there, and we're committed to making that work even better. Keith asks about whether we would allow recurring meetings to be booked through scheduling links. Honestly, not sure. I think there's an interesting tension between scheduling links, smart meetings, and some sort of AI assistant workflow, maybe done over email. The thing about recurring meetings is they're always happening and the schedule always has to change. And so your classic scheduling link experience where you pick a specific date and time usually doesn't map cleanly to that. So we're open to ideas there and are exploring some thoughts. But it might look more like a smart meeting than a scheduling link workflow. But we do know it's a hybrid there. Again, folks asked about apps. Definitely, we intend to build an app. We think a lot of the AI assistant workflows will work really well through a native mobile app. So stay tuned on that. Did get one person who just chimed in, says they're already using Reclaim and Fellow together, and it's amazing in all caps. So thank you for sharing that, Christina. That was great to hear. Gosh, we're almost got all the questions, but there's a few more. Sorry, this is rapid fire. Office 365. I know some of you are waiting for that. It is imminent. And in the act of building Office 365, we re-platformed the whole thing. And so a few things for people who aren't on Office 365 to know. One, you're going to see major performance improvements across the board. And we're already actually quietly behind the scenes. Some new signups are already on that new platform, even if they're on Google Calendar. You'll see the scheduler move faster. Things will move faster in the UI. But one of the other benefits, Will, who asked this question, is that we will be in a better position to support additional calendars beyond Microsoft and Google. And Apple and just any sort of CalDAV sync feed is going to be on the roadmap as well, where we'll be able to pull that in and make sure that we see up-to-date busy information even on third parties like Apple Calendar. So stay tuned there. I expect we'll have good news to share maybe later this year, early next year. Okay. Sorry, just give me a moment. Henry, if there's any you're looking at and want to chime in on, I'm just kind of working through it.
I mean, I think Ramon asked about please can we get a one-off smart meeting feature? And I think we've mostly tackled this, but I think the answer is yes, coming soon for sure. And thank you for your kind words about Reclaim. But yes, that's definitely the holy grail workflow we're trying to get in place. There are a couple sort of task related questions here. I think unrelated to smart meetings and habits. Matt asked about will Reclaim ever be able to work out when I tackle tasks best? For example, admin at 9 a.m. on a Monday or writing Thursday 2 p.m. based on the time taken. I think as we get into, obviously we have things like hours where you can say, I know that I like to do tasks during these specific hours. But I think as we start getting into more and more intelligent workflows around scheduling meetings and scheduling habits, I wouldn't rule it out. We don't have any current plans to do that specifically for tasks, but I could totally see us getting to a place where we use that type of historical data to figure out like when we would recommend you do something and try to use that to kind of build your schedule.
Yeah, and I don't want to let this one slip through without addressing it. David asked any accessibility additions that we're planning to build out in the future. This is an area, accessibility as well as additional language support for non-native English speakers, but certainly anyone that's visually impaired or any sort of physical or motor difficulties. That's something we care a lot about, and we do need to invest more in those capabilities. Bill, I would love it, or David, I'm sorry, I would love it if you could share with us what else you'd like to see. We know we have a gap and we could do better there. One of the reasons that we built Reclaim in such a way that it leans into your existing tools and works with Google Calendar or with Slack or with your project management is those are very rich platforms that often have better accessibility capabilities than early startups like Reclaim. And that's not to give, to cop out or give us an, excuse for not raising the bar and getting there and making sure that we have all those capabilities. But we do want to point out that you can work with Reclaim in existing calendar apps, and many of them do have good support for that. But we'd also like to do more there too. So natively in our app. So in particular, visual impairments and any sort of mouse or keyboard motor difficulties that can be improved. We're open to that feedback, and we'd like to act on it.
Cool. I think the very, very last question that was in here was from Maxime about a Timular integration. And I don't think, Patrick, I've never heard of Timular, so we'll have to look into that. So I guess the short answer is we'll have to first figure out what Timular is, and then we'll tell you if there's an integration on the roadmap. But currently, we don't have any plans for it. Yeah, maybe we can wrap things up here. Really appreciate everyone taking the time, and we're really, really excited to share all this stuff with you, and appreciate all the questions and really kind feedback here. And obviously, if anything comes up or you'd like to discuss any of this stuff live, you can always reach out to us in support at Reclaim.ai, or in the chat in the app. Elizabeth, Patrick, any parting words from you?
No, it's great to have all the support. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks so much for joining us, everyone. This webinar will be on YouTube, the recording, so that will be followed up in the email tomorrow. Thanks so much for taking the time to join us. Hopefully this was good insight. And don't forget, I left this in the chat. We do have a limited time offer to save 20% off 12 months with the discount code meetings to celebrate the Smart Meetings release. So thanks for joining us. Wrapping up right on the hour. Have a great rest of your week.
Thanks so much. Take care.
Thanks, Patrick. Thanks, Henry.
Bye.